He first noticed the well-to-do 30-something couple walking their terrier from his seat at the Broadview diner lunch counter. It was a great observation point for looking out across the western portion of the cemetery. Normally there wasn't much to watch. It was more like a meditation. And the man at the diner, whom the regulars knew as Tommy, had plenty of time to think. Soon enough, Tommy was scheduling his Saturday evening dinners around the couple's little trek, watching and waiting. The woman looked good, prim, black walking heels, bundled up in an expensive fur-fringed jacket. The guy on her arm was a little more disheveled, but he wore nice clothes and had a fat, expensive-looking watch on his wrist. Tommy never saw them go in or out of the cemetery, and the pair certainly never stopped by his favorite slop house. They walked the semicircle at the same time and stopped at the same grave each week. The man at the counter was timing them, irritated that he never saw the pair enter or exit the west gate. They would pause at the grave for about 10 minutes. The dog would sit patiently at the woman's feet. Then Tommy would lose sight of them behind stones, shrubbery, and trees as they continued on the other half of the path. It seemed like there were always some disruption that prevented Tommy from tracking their coming and going. One week it was this melted cheese blob of a couple blocking the window as they struggled to move their coats and get situated for their slovenly feast. Another time it was a plain-faced, track-marked waitress trying to chat him up that drew his attention away during those crucial moments just before 8 p.m. Tommy didn't get mad at the waitress or the other working-class folk he shared most of his meals with. The diner people were his kind of people. He knew more than a few of the regulars had done a stretch or two. He sat there at that counter, staring out the window, thinking about the couple who walked the dog. He eventually dreamed up a whole story for them. The wealthy couple in their palace in the hills above the cemetery slope, how they spent their money on extravagant things while he mouldered away in the valley. Just thinking about it pissed him off. He wouldn't mind spending some of their money, snatch a credit or ATM card, checkbook, a few hundred in cash, and spend a night in a nice motel just up the road, as opposed to the hovels he'd been drifting in and out of since parole. There was something about the woman that got him all worked up. The way she carried herself just maddeningly turned him on, while also simultaneously enraging him over his own lot in life. Tommy grew jealous of her pathetic-looking husband. He knew that eventually his idle jealousy would lead him to act, but he had to make sure he wouldn't get caught and sent back to county. It was finally the Saturday night that Tommy's plans would come to fruition. All those weeks he sat studying and timing the couple would soon pay off. He went into the graveyard 20 minutes before their usual time and waited. It was 7:55 and maybe 5 degrees with a nipping breeze, but he crouched just out of sight of the grave they regularly approached. He had taken the time to make sure no eyes had followed him in. A light snow shower aided his stealth. Tommy heard the dog first, a little pitter-patter on the pavement, slight panting breaths. He didn't make a sound as he fingered the outline of his knife over his pants pocket. When he thought they'd passed out of sight of the diner window, he jumped out of his hiding spot, grabbing a handful of the woman's jacket. Tommy was surprised at how easily she had slipped out of her coat and soundlessly ran off between a row of mausoleums. Her husband lunged at him, but Tommy had his knife ready and drove it into the guy's chest. He was a weak man and fell to the ground, grasping at his injury, making very little sound. Tommy figured he must have hit a lung as the man couldn't scream for help. Tommy was astonished at how hard that little dog bit down on his thumb and forefinger. He nearly dropped the knife, but he was able to throw the canine against a particularly large marble headstone where it let out a sharp yelp. Once 2 of the 3 were dealt with, he went after the woman, his heart pounding in his throat. He hated running, and when he caught her, he was going to do more than take her purse. Early the next morning, as he drank his coffee in his shack, the cemetery's caretaker calmly contacted the police about the body in the snow. He had seen this sort of thing before and hoped the ambulance would arrive soon and move the corpse, as it was in view of his favorite breakfast spot. There'd been a stabbing in the cemetery overnight. He'd seen the wealthy guy around from time to time visiting his wife's grave. He had been the one that found the unconscious victim on the path and drove him to the ER. There was something about that small section near the western gate, within full view of the Broadview, that drew in the crazies, addicts, and the general bottom feeders in town. When the police arrived, they found Tommy with a woman's fur-fringed jacket in hand, not 30 feet from where the caretaker claimed he'd found the stabbing victim. The mugger's face was frozen in a ghastly agony, corpse white, and he had large red stains and bits and pieces of dangling, mutilated flesh concentrated around his crotch area. They noted the little dog's tracks in the snow and Tommy's wild path through the cemetery, which seemed to go in circles. After a brief questioning, the police told the caretaker that the man he brought to the hospital would likely be fine, and that he had probably saved his life. The caretaker told the officers that he couldn't take credit for saving the man, that it was blind luck that he'd spotted the wandering terrier when he did, and drove his truck over to investigate. The coroner's report regarding the perpetrator found dead in Valleyview Cemetery didn't go into detail beyond the toxicology readings, which came back clean. But she did comment that the wounding to the penis and testes was certainly not the primary cause of death, which was recorded as exhaustion, extreme dehydration.